We're back on InfoWars Nightly News, and I'm delighted to welcome filmmaker Chris Maple, who is one of the masterminds behind the new film called The Great Culling, Our Water. And you can actually go to YouTube right now and watch a 35-minute segment of this outstanding documentary, which is available at the InfoWars store, and we're going to talk about it tonight. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here, guys.
Good to have you on. So just start off by telling us the motivation behind the film and the questions you were seeking answers to at the outset.
Well, as you know, we put this film together with Paul Wittenberger, who's my co-producer for the film. He directed What in the World Are They Spraying? And I kind of worked with a little with him behind the scenes on the edit and just gathering data and that sort of thing. At the time, I wasn't really ready to come forward myself and put my face out there, really. I was doing research on my own, looking at heavy metal toxicity. I was more focused on the epidemic of neurological disorders that we're witnessing today, especially in the field of autism, Alzheimer's, all that stuff that we're seeing exploding. Once Paul's film, What in the World Are They Spraying, was done, we looked at each other and we said, here it is with these metals. What is with these metals? I guarantee you these metals are playing a role with the neurological shutoff. And, at the same time, I was looking into fluoride, I was looking into the GMOs and the vaccination schedule, and again, this metallic resin kept coming up over and over. And that was kind of our hunch going into it. We looked at each other and said, let's do a film. We'll look at all three topics, our food, our air, and our water. And we'll kind of look into the metallic link. And as we started digging into it, our hunches were right. The doctors that we were speaking to, the neurologists that we got in touch with, they basically kind of gave us the thumbs up as far as what our hunches were, and from that point on, I think we started this thing 2 years ago, maybe. We sat down to edit it, and we had way too much information for a feature length, which is why we decided to break the film up into three parts. The Great Culling was going to be a three-part one film with three parts, including solutions, and it was just too much to edit, too much information, so we decided to break it up, as I mentioned, and here we have part one, water, which focuses solely on the fluoride issue.
And there's a 35-minute clip, so the full-length documentary, specifically with the water one, isn't that 90 minutes?
Yes, it is. I believe it's like 92 minutes.
Right. So there are going to be three films, each 90 minutes. Of course, that probably would be too long to put into one, but once you break them up into three, more easily digestible parts, I guess that makes a lot of sense. So in this clip that's on YouTube, basically you nail down the point that it's not just fluoride that's going in our water, is it? Because when they actually dump it into the water supply, it's bound to this other substance. So just tell us about the history of where the idea of putting fluoride in the water actually came from and how the process works in actually getting it into the water supply that people drink.
Well, as far as the history, we tried not to really dive too much into post-1945, where we here in the United States began fluoridating our communities. And it was Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was ironic because it was right after World War II, and we all know what happened after World War II with the Project Paperclip, and we kind of ingested all of the National Socialistic ideology here in this country. Shortly after that, we began fluoridating our water here, as there are rumors that the prison camps fluoridated as well, and Stalin, I believe, there's some rumors that he was playing around with the fluoride as well. And as we know, it definitely is a medication. It makes us docile. We began the program here in the United States, in Grand Rapids. There's a lot that goes into the history of fluoride, and a lot of it does evolve around the atomic bomb program. what was going on is, the phosphate mining industry was coming under litigation for, fluoride poisoning, as was the atomic energy program, and they needed some science to back up fluoride, and thus spawned Andrew Mellon and the U.S. Treasury Secretary at the time, who was also the founder of the Mellon Institution. An agency notorious for giving industry the scientific data it needed to back up its claims, and especially with litigation. So it's that whole revolving door issue that we're still dealing with today between the public and the private sector, where you have gentlemen like Andrew Mellon, who was U.S. Treasury Secretary at the time, and in addition to that, he was one of the founders of Alcoa, which was the aluminum company of the day that was coming under huge pressure, litigation pressure, that is, and also he founded the Mellon Institution, got the science behind it, and man, they started fluoridating shortly after that. So you got to remember, this Mellon Institution also said that asbestos was safe back in the day.
It's amazing. You mentioned the Second World War and the death camps. There's actually a quote from U.S. Air Force Major George R. Jordan, and he was a US-Soviet liaison officer in the 50s, and he said the Soviets openly admitted to, quote, using the fluoride in the water supplies in their concentration camps to make the prisoners stupid, docile, and subservient. And I mean, that's just astounding, isn't it, Chris?
Well,
they would admit that.
Yeah, it's if, again, you do the research, you dig it up, you will find a number of quotes like that. I mean, even in modern day, we've got even former EPA scientists expressing their concerns with the hazardous waste and fluoride itself. So I mean, yeah, it's there. I mean, how deep do you want to go? I mean, that right there is a film in itself, and we could have focused on that emphasis, but we chose not to, because we felt as though this fluoride community weren't really ready for that. We had to kind of ease into this whole global agenda thing with them. I mean, that movement is the delicate audience that we had to kind of pump the brakes with on this film. So I've done the research. I know you have. It's there. We could have made this film, just this one film, 3 hours long, but we had to kind of cap it.
No, I understand completely. I mean, there's a book called The Fluoride Deception, which is about 400 pages long, and probably the first third of that book is purely about all the accidents back in the 30s with the fluorine. All the chemical accidents in the factories, just causing horrific injuries, and that's a whole third of the book. So you've got to make a 90-minute film. I understand you've got to focus on, what's current, what's happening now. So let's get into it. I mean, we've got tons of studies. We've got Harvard studies. We've got all kinds of studies. What are some of the major health impacts of ingesting fluoride for humans?
Well, I mean, where do we begin? I mean, we've got arthritis, thyroid suppression. It's linked to most cancers. I mean, there's what do we've got? Cardiovascular, kidney diseases, intestinal defects, and again, that gastrointestinal tract issue kind of lines up with the whole autistic thing, because that's typically the first signs of autism is in the gastrointestinal tract. When we look at these, even into the GMOs, being, these foods that are, pesticide resistant, and even pesticides themselves, well, what is the effect that these genetically modified organisms are having on the insects that digest them is gastrointestinal. So it kind of lines right up. Pineal gland suppression, we're seeing, calcification in the pineal gland with the fluoride, skeletal fluorosis, huge. Dental fluorosis is one of the most outward signs of overexposure to fluoride. Diabetes. I mean, all these things, we're witnessing today in this country is remarkable. It just all lines up with fluoride. And you wonder why. We were talking about, you mentioned the prison camps earlier, how it made them docile. Well, I tell people, look, if this information doesn't bother you, if this doesn't raise an eyebrow for you, well, you can thank the fluoride for that, because it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
Well, actually, it's a funny thing, because I think somebody who was on my Facebook earlier had been drinking their fluoride, because I announced that I was interviewing you on the show tonight, and they actually tried to make the argument that putting fluoride in the water supply was not dangerous because they put it in at a level which is the same amount found in toothpaste, which they said was, quote, harmless. So, Chris, maybe you can address that by telling the viewers what's written on the back of a regular tube of toothpaste about people who ingest it.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like most people, they don't read the labels, and that's another reason why we got this whole issue with GMOs is, people don't care what's on the label. They just assume if it's on the shelf, it's safe. Well, flip over any fluoridated toothpaste and you'll see, as you mentioned, the back side of it's got a warning label right onto it. Caution, keep out of hands of children. If swallowed more than the recommended dose, contact poison control immediately. Now, the recommended dose is a pea-size amount. I don't know about you, but when I used to put toothpaste on my toothbrush, which I still do, it's not fluoridated anymore, it was way more than a pea-size amount. It was probably 4 pea sizes. So that's 1 part per million per pea size amount. So if you're to ingest, as a child anyway, they're more susceptible just because of the size of them. More than that recommended dose, they're to contact poison control. Well, let's do some math here. Fluoridated water is fluoridated right around 1 part per million. So my tap water should have a warning label right on it then, shouldn't it?
It's amazing. I mean, it's the same thing here in the UK. Under the 1972 Poisons Control Act, fluoride is actually a toxic substance, so they have to put the same warning on the back of the fluoride toothpaste here in the UK. And I mean, the fact that there's a skull and crossbones on the packaging of this stuff when it's at the water treatment facility should give you a pretty big clue as to its safety, shouldn't it, Chris?
It really should. I mean, it's ironic because we actually showed the packaging in the film, and you're right, it's got skull and bones right on the side of it, poison all over it. To handle it, you need a hazmat suit. It'll eat through anything it comes in contact with. If you were to take your hazmat glove off and touch it, it'll kill you instantly. But right on the same poisonous bag in the right-hand corner, it says, it says all over the bag, do not intake, do not ingest internally. And then on the right-hand side of it, it says directions for water fluoridation. So, yeah, it's some pretty nasty stuff.
I mean, it's amazing. I find it astounding that there's still this idea that's pushed by the establishment, and they even used it in a political campaign. There was a politician in Nevada called Sharon Angle who was running partly on a campaign to get the fluoride out of the water, and she was demonized by the likes of MSNBC. They basically characterized her as a paranoid kook simply for talking about fluoride in the water. So why do you think there's that kind of that characteristic that's being created around people who merely discuss the idea of fluoride being bad?
Well, they're trying to protect the program. It's about business. It's about big money. It's again, it's the same old hat we're dealing with most of everything. And fluoride just this big of a piece of the puzzle, as I'm sure you know, and the majority of the audience knows that as well. It's just they're looking to protect the fluoridation program, not the people themselves. As we've heard over and over from the CDC and science is on the side of water fluoridation. There's no controversy here in the United States. Why? Obviously, yeah, in the United States, there's none. We're over, almost 75% fluoridated. Nobody cares because they're drugged up. But we look outside of the U.S. and we see, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, which is 97% fluoride free. China, Japan have banned it. Belgium, Austria, Denmark, Finland, France, Switzerland, Norway, Sweden. I mean, the list goes on, the number of countries that have banned it. So why are these countries banning it? Why aren't we? Why aren't we labeling it? Again, it just goes back to the whole issue of, look at what Obama did, when he was a senator and running. One of his biggest promises were, I'm going to take the GMOs and label them. We have the right to know. And what did he end up go ahead and doing when he got into office? He made one of Monsanto's biggest lobbyists and attorneys. He's the head of the FDA. It's like, putting a monkey in charge of the bananas. It's just nothing's going to change, and it's just that whole revolving door that I was talking about between the public and private sector. As you know, the media, is just as much as for sale as the scientific community today, as are the politicians. And it's unfortunate, but thank goodness for programs, such as Alex's show and, InfoWars and the Nightly News and there's a bunch of others. We got Mike Adams out there doing his job, and I'm just a regular guy. I'm not a filmmaker. I'm a photographer. My wife and I run a business together. Just good friends with Paul Wittenberg. I happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I basically had enough. And once I realized, what really got me going was the impact that the fluoride and these metals are having on our children. It was the vaccination program, the increase in 1983, that really got me going. And that's my whole life I've always been one to stick up for strangers and people I don't know, and battling other people's battles, just because I can't stand bullies. I hate them. So, and that's kind of what got me going with this. Now I'm a father myself. I got a 5-month-old, and happy, healthy baby. Will never see a vaccination or fluoride, for that matter, or a GMO or any of that. So that's what it's all about.
I mean, completely. It's about reclaiming the power over your own body, your own health. And that's, it's achievable. A lot of this stuff that we talk about, it's, you can't fight City Hall. A lot of people think, well, what's the point in bothering? I can't make a difference. With your own body, your own health, the health of your family, your kids, you can make a difference. So we can win. And I mean, we're winning in Europe. You mentioned Monsanto. They're getting their butts kicked all over Europe. We're winning on that front. But I mean, a question I had was, you talked about the Obama administration there. They're now pushing global warming again in light of this hurricane. Of course, that's a completely disputed science, whether man-made climate change is taking place or not. Why do you think the environmental movement is so behind the global warming agenda, whereas they don't really seem to care about toxic waste being put in the water supply?
Well, it's that whole Mother Earth thing, that's what, I don't know. I mean, as far as the environmental movement, again, and there's a number of climatologists out there who have been silenced. When you look at the climatologists, the scientists that look at this thing on a daily basis and what their findings are, they're being silenced. Just like, how many cancer cures are suppressed, how many alternative energies are suppressed, how many scientists have been murdered over the past couple of decades with their findings. As far as the environmental movement, I think we both know that it's going to herald in a global tax, which will then herald in that global bank that they're really trying to get their hands on, with the carbon taxes. So, again, I believe it's all man-made, with the HARP programs tied in with the geoengineering and who knows what else, but. And again, the people who are on the front lines aren't doing their research. They're just kind of regurgitating what the mass media is spoon-feeding them. So, because they believe everything they hear as far whatever comes out of that television stream. They won't take the time to do their own research. And that's all it really takes. And that's something we wanted to kind of stress in the film, too, was that... you don't have to be this crazy activist and out on the corner on a soapbox with your blowhorn and making a big stink, or you don't have to even go make a documentary. But you do need to do something. You do need to start at home with yourself, with your family. Take a few minutes out of your day, do a little bit of research. Don't take our word for it, because you'll come back a believer on your own just if you take a few minutes out of your day to do your own research. So. Exactly.
I mean, you mentioned scientists being shut up. It was actually Dr. Phyllis Mullinex, I don't know if I've got the pronunciation right there, but she exposed the dangers of fluoride with the rat study back in the mid-90s, and she was academically and professionally blackballed for doing so. Did you read about that case?
Yeah, we did. We actually, I think we touch on it a little bit later in the film. She actually is in there, and it's just, again, it's the same story over and over. Whether it's the fluoridation community, whether it's Dr. Andrew Wakefield with his vaccination studies, or I mean, it just goes on and on. Look at Dr. William Marcus. He was the head EPA scientist, toxicologist, who first started speaking out on fluoridation, and he was ridiculed and fired, and actually sued the EPA, got his job back, and they still gave him grief, and he had to sue them again, and it was just awful what they put the poor guy through. He ended up having a stroke, and I mean he's still around today. But Dr. David Kennedy, who's a big part of our film, is putting together a documentary himself called Fluoride Gate, and he touches on Dr. William Marcus's his trials and tribulations that he had to go through. And again, these are their own scientists coming out and speaking up, and it's they're shut up.
You've got so many experts, great scientists in the film, but you also went out and asked members of the public if they knew about what was in their drinking water. What did you discover? Are most of them ignorant about fluoride, or were you surprised by the level of awareness?
Well, it was one kid we talked to that he kind of had an idea a little bit about what it is and what it does. The majority of people just think it's something for their teeth. They're all familiar with it's supposed to be a benefit, and the majority of them are kind of regurgitate what their dentists are telling them, as their dentists are regurgitating what they're told, because the majority of dentists aren't even doing their research on fluoride. They're just just like the doctors out there when they're signing their prescriptions, they're just kind of taking the money and keeping quiet. And one thing that we found with this film is the majority of scientists, experts in the field that were willing to talk with us were already retired, or they kind of they're already out of the game. And that was alarming to me, just because I realized that even if the scientists or the expert, the dentists that are still practicing, even if they are aware of the dangers of fluoride, they're not going to say anything because their careers are on the line, and they don't want to jeopardize the program or their careers. And it's sad, but that's where we're at. And as far as the people that we did speak with, no one really knew about the toxic effects, the side effects to it. So it was pretty interesting getting out there on the street and enlightening people.
And the thing about fluoride with regard to teeth is the whole debate, and it is still up for debate whether fluoride is even good for your teeth, but it was supposed to be topical, wasn't it? You weren't supposed to swallow it and ingest it.
Right. That's the whole thing. I mean, even topically, there's science that's coming out today that states that it doesn't even have any topical benefits to it. So, but yeah, you're not supposed to swallow the toothpaste. What makes you think you're supposed to swallow it in the water? Don't you remember? And this is one thing that I would tell people on the street is, don't you remember getting your fluoride treatments as a kid? The gel that you would bite into. And everybody remembers that because, they make them, that's the best part of the whole dental, when I was getting my teeth cleaned as a kid, it was like, they had the bubble gum flavor, the watermelon flavor, but you're not supposed to swallow it. Well, that treatment was 12,500 part per million, which is why the nurse would run in the room every 5 minutes, a few minutes, and say, don't swallow it. Did you swallow it? Don't swallow it. And they'd have the sucker in there and taking all the saliva out. They make you spit and rinse a couple dozen times. And when I put that into perspective for the people out in the street, they could see the kind of the light bulb clicking and going, oh yeah, I do remember that. I do remember not being being told not to swallow. There's kids that have died right in the dentist office, right during their fluoride treatment. So it's extremely toxic.
Now we know some of the financial motives behind putting fluoride in the water. Of course, it's a cheap way of disposing a toxic substance. But the film's called The Great Culling. I mean, you've got the Georgia Guidestones there at the start. How do you tie in fluoride as a tool of population reduction? How are the two connected?
Well, you know, and this is we've come under a lot of attack for the title of the film, and it was one of the reasons why it took a little longer for us to put this thing out, because we didn't get the support like they got on What in the World Are They Spraying? You know, and it was a nefarious title, and you know, I liked it. Paul liked it. People either love it or they hate it, but you're right, we do touch on the Georgia Guidestones, and you know, the series, this film, these 3 parts. Part 2 is on GMOs and vaccination program. Part 3 is we're gonna circle around and touch on the geoengineering our air. But the 3 of them together, you know, there's no doubt that what is going on here is this, I think personally, and you know, the majority of people that, you know, I interviewed, even though they wouldn't say it publicly, they'll all admit that, you know, fluoride causes cancer. Fluoride causes, you know, we have 50,000 people that die each year in America due to cancers that were spawned by fluoride. So if it's a slow kill. It's not like an immediate kill out in the street, and that's the hard thing that people are, you know, having a hard time digesting, is that, wait a minute, they're not trying to kill us. Well, they are. It's just they're doing it very slowly and methodically, and they're doing it over the course of time. In addition to that, they're the same people that have the power and ability to put this stuff into our water are on the other end selling you the cure and the treatment, the pill, the prescription drug. And ironically enough, the prescription drug contains fluoride. So, you know, it's a slow kill. Alex mentioned this. Alex is actually going to be in our film too. We have him for part 2 and 3. We didn't really discuss much of fluoride with him when we interviewed him, but he'll be making a cameo in part 2 and 3 of the film. So we're excited about that.
That's good to hear. So we got, you know, was it 70% of America's water supply now fluoridated? 45 of the 50 largest cities in America now with fluoridated water. And whereas, as you mentioned before, Europe's basically scaling it down. There are a few areas in the UK that still have it. 97% of European countries don't. So we've seen success on some fronts with people actually getting it out of their water. And I guess that's the biggest question, Chris. How can people lobby to get the fluoride removed from their local water supply?
It's a good question. And that's kind of what this film is about, the power of communication. It's what you're doing right there. It's what I'm doing. As I mentioned earlier, you know, you don't have to have a blowhorn sitting out on the corner. You pick up the phone. Every bottled water that we tested, because we tested the majority of bottled waters that we could get our hands on, every single one of them had fluoride, levels of fluoride in it. But what's important is they all have 1-800 numbers on the side of the bottle, consumer affair numbers. Call them up. Let's say you have a specific brand that you like. Call them up. Ask them what the fluoride level is. Once they tell you what the level is, because in this we're the only country that doesn't put the fluoride level on the label either. Just like the GMOs, we won't label. You go to Mexico, anywhere else, they'll have the fluoride level on the label. In the United States, we just put the fat content. But, you know, spread the word. We interviewed former Congresswoman and Senator Karen Johnson, and one thing that she had mentioned to us when she was in office, that if she received 5 to 7 phone calls from her constituents on a daily basis on an issue, her desk was completely wiped clean, and that was the focus for her team for the day. That's 5 phone calls to a congresswoman. So the power of communication does work. You know, you know, pick up the phone, show up at a town meeting, call your representatives up. You know, I've got a phone number for the White House right here if you guys want it. I mean, and I've called it, and then it works. They'll answer your call. They'll take your, you know, they'll take your information, whatever you want down. But it's what it's all about, the power of communication. You got it. If it's important to you and your children, which really what this is all about, and ourselves, you know, we all have loved ones that have succumbed to one of these side effects. There's no doubt. I mean, 75% of us are going to succumb to some type of cancer. So is it a culling? Yes. Is it happening overnight? No. Does it take a little while? Yeah. If you swallow a tube of toothpaste, it could happen overnight. So that number for the White House, case anybody wants it. It's area code 202-456-1111. You call that up and let them know how you feel. Who knows, you'll probably get thrown on a list, but if you want to play it safe, contact the bottled water company. Start there. Contact your local, city council members. Send them a copy of our film. Make a copy of it, burn it, send it off to them. That's the only way we're going to do this. We did have some success. If you look across the United States, we're seeing communities that are pushing fluoride right out of their communities. So, we had a city like San Diego last year who lost the battle. They've been fighting it for 60 years successfully, and they just lost the battle. If we have a big city like San Diego who's losing the battle, then we have, I think 11 communities last year who were able to force it out. So it's this give and take thing. Right now we're just about 75% fluoridated in this country, and we're growing. But at the same time, a small number of underground people are coming up and becoming knowledgeable, and they're making us think about it. And more importantly, they're educating the people who can make the decisions.
The Great Culling, Our Water is the film. It's available right now at the InfoWars store. Chris, any other websites where people can go to get more information?
Yeah, we've got our own website as well. Yeah, definitely go to Alex's store where we're selling it. But if you want to check us out, we're thegreatculling.org, and that's Culling. A lot of people aren't really aware of the Great Culling and what the culling means, and I'll just let everybody know now. It's a thinning of the herd. And we're the herd.
Chris Maple, we appreciate you joining us, and with the other two films coming out in the near future, we'll be sure to speak to you again. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go.
Every 4 years, the United States of America hears the drumbeat of billions of campaign dollar attack ads, meaningless debate with empty analysis in poll after poll after poll. This can only mean one thing. It's time to pick our globalist puppet leader.
We're going to be left with a choice of a lesser of two evils. And I'm saying I don't go out with evils, I don't deal with evils, I don't do business with evils, I don't hang out with evils. Why would I vote for an evil to run my life or run my country?
Will it be globalist puppet A or puppet B?
They continue to vote for these Democrats and Republicans, the people that are wrecking our country, and yet they still vote for them.
Unlike North Korea and China, we Americans have the illusion of choice this November 6th.
I think that a lot of votes are going to be stolen.
I don't know how you could possibly have voter fraud when your son owns the voting machines.
1.4 million votes were lost, spoiled as they call them in the biz, through these so-called glitches.
The choice is not up to you. Which management team from Slavery Incorporated will run our country into oblivion for the next 4 years? Tune in to Infowars.com or PrisonPlanet.tv this Tuesday, November 6th, as another meaningless pageant is played out.